My name is Sarah Miller. I'm a 40-year-old housewife who's just turned 40. I live peaceful days in the suburbs of Michigan with my husband Mark, our 8-year-old son Ethan, and our 5-year-old daughter Olivia. As I was making pancakes in the kitchen with the morning sun streaming in, as usual, I felt small arms wrap around my waist from behind. "Good morning, Mom. Are there blueberries in today's pancakes?" I turned around to see Ethan looking up at me with eyes full of expectation. His brown hair was messy from sleep. I couldn't help but smile. "Yes, they're your favorite, aren't they?" "Yay!" Ethan happily bounced around and sat at the table. Olivia came right after, sitting next to Ethan in her pink pajamas. "I want blueberries too." "Of course, there's enough for everyone." Finally, Mark appeared, patting each of the children's heads before giving me a kiss. "Good morning, Sarah. Another lovely morning, isn't it?" "Good morning, Mark." At the time, I didn't realize how precious these ordinary morning scenes were. Weekdays pass by in a flurry. Mark is busy managing his auto parts company, and I spend my days taking care of the children and housework. Still, we always made sure to spend time together as a family on weekends. We'd have picnics in the park, participate in reading clubs at the local library. Sometimes we'd all go cheer for Ethan at his baseball games. Olivia is still engrossed in t-ball practice. One evening, Mark came home looking excited. "Sarah, everyone. I have wonderful news." The children ran to their father. "What is it, Dad?" "We're going to Disney World in Florida next month." The children's cheers echoed throughout the house. Both Mark and I felt truly happy seeing the joy on our children's faces. The days of preparation were like the lead-up to Christmas. The children looked at guidebooks almost every day, listing the attractions they wanted to visit. While I was busy with packing, I felt my heart flutter at my family's smiles. And then, the long-awaited day of the trip arrived. "Ethan, did you put on sunscreen properly?" "Yes, I did." "Olivia, you didn't forget your hat, did you?" "I've got it, Mom." Reassured by the children's energetic responses, we headed to the airport. The first few days in Florida were like a dream. Taking photos with Mickey Mouse, riding thrilling roller coasters. The children's eyes sparkled, and Mark and I felt like we had returned to our childhood. However, that happiness suddenly turned into a nightmare. On the afternoon of the 4th day of our trip, we were at Magic Kingdom. Mark suggested, "Let's all have some ice cream," and we headed towards a nearby stand. "I need to go to the bathroom," Ethan said. "All right. Go with Dad." Mark nodded and took Ethan's hand. "We'll be right back." No one imagined that those would be Ethan's last words. When they didn't return after 15 minutes, I started to feel anxious. "Olivia, let's go look for Dad and Ethan." We held hands and searched around, but we couldn't find them anywhere. Panic began to set in. When I finally found Mark, his face was pale. "Sarah. Ethan is gone." From that moment, our lives changed completely. The happy days we had known became a distant memory. After Ethan disappeared, our lives changed completely. The dreamlike time at Disney World turned into a nightmare in an instant. That night, we were interrogated by the police in our hotel room. Mark repeated the same explanation over and over. On the way to the bathroom, in the crowd, when I noticed, he was already gone. I held Olivia tightly, desperately trying to hold back my tears. From the next day, we searched every corner of the park. Employees and other tourists helped, but there was no sign of Ethan anywhere. Ethan! Where are you? My cries echoed emptily between the colorful buildings. A week passed, and we had to return home. On the plane back, Olivia asked in a small voice, "Mom, is Big Brother not coming back?" I couldn't answer that question. Even after returning home, the search continued. We went to the police almost daily, put up posters all over the neighborhood, and spread information on social media. However, as days passed, the response from others faded. Time will heal. He'll surely be found. Such words of comfort actually hurt me more. Mark began to immerse himself in work. It was probably his way of coping. However, this led to new problems. One night, Mark came home late and said with a sigh, "Sarah, something unbelievable happened at work." What happened? James suddenly bought an expensive foreign car. And in cash. I gasped. I knew about James's promotion, but I didn't think he had that kind of money to spare. And, Mark continued, James has been acting strange lately. It's like he's hiding something. This information added new fuel to my suspicions. The next day, I called Emily and invited her for tea. When we met at the cafe, my sister seemed somewhat uneasy. "Emily, how have you been lately?" "Huh? Oh, fine. Normal." During our conversation, I casually brought up the topic of children. "By the way, do you and James plan to have children?" Emily's expression clouded for a moment. "Well, we've been trying, but it hasn't happened yet." At that moment, Emily's phone rang. She hurriedly answered and left the table. When she returned, her face was pale. "Sorry, Sarah. Something urgent came up. We'll catch up another time." Emily hurried away. As I watched her leave, I felt my suspicions growing in my chest. That night, I confided everything to Mark. Olivia's words, my investigation, and my suspicions about Emily and James. At first, Mark couldn't believe it. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "Emily took Ethan." "That's ridiculous." But as I explained each piece of information I had gathered, his expression began to change. Indeed, there are too many strange points. The next day, Mark secretly observed James's behavior at work. In the evening, he came home with a surprised look. "Sarah, James was making a suspicious phone call. Talking about that child." At that moment, the TV news caught our attention. Tonight's top story: a large-scale illegal adoption ring operating across state lines has been busted. This organization, which allegedly arranged children for wealthy and fertile couples. Mark and I looked at each other. Everything was starting to connect. To confirm the truth, we made a bold plan. We decided to sneak into Emily and James's house on a day when they would be out. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked anxiously. "We have no other choice. It's for Ethan." On the chosen day, we nervously headed to Emily's house. Fortunately, the neighborhood was quiet and deserted. Mark took the role of lookout, and I sneaked in through the back door. The house was eerily quiet. With my heart pounding in my ears, I headed to the second floor. As I approached the spot Olivia had pointed out, I could see a slight misalignment in the wallpaper. With trembling hands, I pushed on the wall, and to my surprise, it opened. A narrow passage appeared, with stairs leading down. "It can't be." I took out my flashlight and carefully descended the stairs. Damp air touched my skin. At the bottom of the stairs, I gasped. There was a small room, and on the bed lay a boy. "Ethan." At the sound of my faint voice, the boy slowly raised his face. Gaunt features, long overgrown hair. But it was undoubtedly my son. "Mom." Ethan's voice was weak, and he looked incredulous. I rushed over and embraced Ethan. The tears wouldn't stop. I'm sorry. Mom took so long to come." At that moment, I heard a noise from upstairs. "Is someone there?" It was Emily's voice. I picked up Ethan and rushed up the stairs. When we emerged into the living room, Emily and James were standing there. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Emily cried out in surprise. "The question is, what are you doing?" I said angrily. "How could you do this?" James tried to step forward, but at that moment, Mark burst into the house. "I've called the police. You can't escape now." The color drained from Emily and James's faces. "No, Sarah. Let me explain," Emily said, looking on the verge of tears. But by then, the sound of police sirens could already be heard. A few minutes later, police officers entered the house. Emily and James were arrested, and Ethan was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I held Ethan's hand tightly as I rode in the ambulance with him. "It's okay now, you're safe." Ethan smiled weakly. The long nightmare had finally come to an end. In the ambulance, I held Ethan's emaciated hand tightly. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. What had he experienced during this past year? Upon arriving at the hospital, doctors immediately began examining Ethan. Mark and I spent anxious hours in the waiting room. Several hours later, the attending physician came to us. "Don't worry, his life is not in danger. However, we've observed malnutrition and mild dehydration due to long-term confinement." We let out a sigh of relief. "Can we see our son?" Mark asked. "Yes, please do." When we entered the hospital room, Ethan was lying small in the bed. When he saw us, tears welled up in his eyes. "Mom! Dad!" We rushed over and gently embraced Ethan. "It's okay now. We'll always be by your side." That night, Ethan slowly began to talk about his experience. At first, they told me they were taking me to a new family. But then I was locked in a dark room. According to Ethan, the space under the floor was narrow with a low ceiling. There was a simple toilet, and Emily brought meals twice a day. There were books and an old game console, but hardly any outside light came in, and he lost his sense of time. Sometimes I could hear voices from upstairs, but no one noticed my voice. Ethan's words broke our hearts. A few days later, we received a detailed report from the police. Emily and James were part of a large-scale illegal adoption ring operating across state lines. They had been receiving substantial payments in return for arranging children for wealthy couples struggling with infertility. It seems they kidnapped Ethan to prove their loyalty to the organization, the detective explained with a stern expression. This incident led to the revelation of the entire organization, and many people involved were arrested. Sadly, other children who had been confined were also discovered. Ethan's recovery took time. The emotional scars were deeper than the physical ones. He often woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night, and we took turns staying by his side. With the advice of a psychological counselor, we gradually rebuilt our family bonds. Olivia was overjoyed at her brother's return and stayed close to Ethan every day. "Big brother, I drew this. It's a picture of our family." Seeing the picture Olivia drew, Ethan showed a smile for the first time in a long while. Mark also adjusted his work schedule to spend as much time as possible with the family. On holidays, we spent peaceful days having picnics in the park or watching movies together. Sometimes, Ethan would suddenly become anxious. At such times, we all hugged him and repeatedly told him, "It's okay now." As time passed, we had more opportunities to see Ethan smile. His recovery became a source of hope for our entire family. A year has passed since then. Today is Ethan's 10th birthday. The living room is decorated with colorful balloons, and a large chocolate cake sits on the table. "Happy birthday, Ethan." The voices of family and friends echo throughout the room. Ethan smiles, looking a bit embarrassed but happy. Having overcome a difficult period, our family feels more strongly connected than ever before. There will surely be challenges ahead, but we're confident we can overcome them together. As Ethan blows out the candles, a big round of applause erupts, as if announcing the beginning of a new year.